Hello, once again. Welcome back inside the Tier 4 studio here in Morgantown, West Virginia for 24/7 Sports. I am Mike Casassa. Today is Wednesday, October 11th, a few days away from West Virginia's upcoming football game against Texas Tech, a few days removed from the most recent one, both against ranked teams. This is important because TCU was ranked number 8 in the country. Texas Tech is number 24 in the country. Teams with numbers next to their name have been very good against the Mountaineers of late. In fact, West Virginia has lost 9 straight games to ranked teams. Dana Holgorsen 6-17. I apologize if you've heard these numbers before, but they are frightening and a little bit earlier than the Halloween schedule would probably want to create for you, because in the Big 12 you're going to see a lot of teams like this, right? Oklahoma State, likely going to be ranked. Doubt Baylor will. Maybe Texas. Not sure about Iowa State. But at least 2 more after Saturday, you would suspect. And you never know what you're going to get from the rest of the league, because honestly, did you think Texas Tech would be ranked at this stage of the season? Probably not, because Cliff Kingsbury very much was on the hot seat at the start of this season. He began in 2013, and that was actually the last time he brought a ranked team onto the football field. They started that season 7-0, the 7th win of the season against West Virginia. They jumped into the top 10, lost 5 in a row after that, haven't been very good since then, and that is what put Kingsbury on the hot seat. Big difference this year is defense. Not great. Not even the top 100 in some things, but when you go from dead last or next to dead last to 105, 101, well, that's a big improvement. And when you're taking the ball away from the other team, that certainly matters. That is what Texas Tech has done so far, getting extra possessions for what remains a very good, very explosive, very effective offense here. That's bad news for West Virginia, because defense had been a question mark for the Mountaineers. Certainly looked a lot better against TCU, holding the number 8 team in the country to 31 points at home and facilitating some of their offensive success with bad tackling, a punt return debacle. Well, really, the defense wasn't as bad as the scoreboard suggested. Truth be told, the first half, excellent. And Tony Gibson said, as good as his defense has played in a half against a good team since he has been the defensive coordinator. Consider that the number that they've done to Baylor in the past, or any quality opponent that they've seen in the conference or even a non-conference play. That 30 minutes was the best he'd seen. Big reason why? David Long, of course. Welcome him back from his knee injury. Played just about every snap, was effective as a blitzer, didn't make the tackle on the gadget play, the trick play on the throwback pass, but at least got himself in a position, made it possible for others to catch up and make the tackle. That didn't happen. That's not Long's fault, but he could have put that fire out very early. What's good news for West Virginia is that Tony Gibson has had Texas Tech's number in the past couple of years, and his team right now is the healthiest and probably has the most on the shelf, as far as good things on the shelf, not players on the shelf, but quality players available, I guess, people he can reach at and put in the field, because he wants to as opposed to has to. When you have to play freshman safeties against a team that's running the ball down your throat, that's prohibitive to being successful on defense. That's not necessarily the situation that the Mountaineers are in right now. Have their best 11 for the first time all season, and that didn't start until 2 weeks ago yesterday. The Tuesday of the bye week, actually, was the first time that David Long really practiced full scale with the team. So this is still new. They're getting back to normal, and at the same time, they're getting better. Home game, noon, homecoming. I don't even know what the channel is. Fox Sports 7 or something like that. You have to check your local listen there. I'm not sure how many of you get it, but probably anticipate a lot of points there. If you are a fan of offense, probably going to see it. Ball in the air a bunch, although Texas does run the ball better. West Virginia's air show you know well about. Will Greer, David Sills, now even Karan White, who had maybe his best game of his career. Things are going good in that direction for the offense, with one minor, maybe major problem. We'll keep an eye on it. The number of receivers that West Virginia uses during the game, it's really just 4. It's Sills, Jennings, White, and Marcus Sims. Occasionally you'll see some Reggie Roberson, but I'm not sure he's just not out there to fill out the alignment, maybe catch a pass if he can. Got to have that trust from Will Greer, but if you watch the end of the game, receivers were dragging themselves back to the line of scrimmage. The quarterback had to wait for them to run their route out the field, hustle back, West Virginia wants to play with tempo, but if your guys are wheezing and dragging themselves back to line of scrimmage, what good does it do to go fast? If you watch some of those plays late, especially running plays, guys weren't moving off the line. They were trying to get their breath and take a break when they could. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. I think if you're playing 65 to 80 snaps in really hot conditions in Dallas, that's going to tax you. Doing that in the 5th game of the season is one matter. Doing that in the 9th or 10th game is another. How does West Virginia cover this? Do you play receivers? Well, if they hadn't gotten on the field earlier in the season, now's the time, really. It should have happened earlier, but if they weren't there before, are they there now? How do they get there? Are they going to be, finished products that the team trusts to put out there, or are they out there because they really need to give one of those 3 receivers a rest? Marcus Sims can play his one spot, but can he play enough to consistently give Karan White or David Sills a break? Really going to be interesting. Does West Virginia play less of its 10 personnel, which is 1 running back, no fullback, tight end? Does it go to 21 personnel where you use 2 running backs, or 20 personnel, I should say, 2 running backs, no tight ends? Do you use, do you have Eli Wellman on the field more and further tax him? We don't know. It's going to be a creative challenge for the offense to see what they do, and it begins Saturday against Texas Tech. I've rambled on a bunch here. I forgot this is actually the time where I take your questions. I don't see a whole bunch, so if you have them, please throw them in. I'll peek over here at the screen what we have so far. This comes from Mountaineer Musket Man. Is TJ Banks a take Wednesday if he were to try and commit? I don't know. It's going to be an interesting question. This is a recruiting question, of course. A player who maybe is a tight end, maybe is a defensive end, an athlete, someone that West Virginia and the player have been mutually interested in for a while. Maybe has a college decision coming up here soon. We'll see. West Virginia's recruited a bunch of tight ends, either through traditional, high school recruiting or the transfer route. I think they want to grow that position. You figure you lose Wellman next year. You have Trayvon Wesco, hasn't done a whole lot on the field. You already have 2 commitments in, I believe, or excuse me, 1 commitment in, O'Loughlin, the tight end, and Giovanni Haskins, the transfer from Miami. So you could be pretty big and have some players you can use. And again, further diversify your personnel combinations. So this is actually a good segue because West Virginia doesn't really have a tight end they can use. Everybody likes Wellman, what he can do. He lets them go from one formation to the next without really having to sub. It's smooth, it's helpful, but he can't play every snap. And further, if you have to play with your 4 best receivers the most, because that's sometimes the best things that West Virginia does on offense, if you're going to expel him, you don't want to always use the same guy. So if you can give Wellman a break and not let him play so much, remember, his is a very physically demanding position. If you have another guy you can use, 1, you can play fast, and 2, you can play the actual game that you want to play with the formations and the plays you call at the tempo you desire. You don't want to wear everybody out. You don't want to wear out your 4 receivers or your fullback or your tight end. So if you can do it and have different fullbacks and tight ends, if you have greater depth at that position, it certainly helps. That's been a handcuff for them. I think it's probably been avoided where it could have been problematic in the red zone. You want to have big bodies who can maybe out jump or box out linebackers or safeties in the red zone. West Virginia hasn't had trouble scoring in the red zone, but certainly could be easier if you have one of those 6'4", 230-pound bodies who can shove a linebacker out of the way, who can box out a safety or some other smaller defender. But certainly something to keep an eye on there. An athlete, again, he could be a defensive lineman, defensive end. He could be a tight end. What his situation is, who knows? Where he picks, who knows? But I think it's something that, again, both sides have been interested in for a while. So why not tune in and see what happens there? His second question, will Billy Kinney's cramps cause him to lose his full-time job to John Young, who is now healthy after, parentheses, insert unknown injury? I don't want to speculate on the injury. I heard it was something with the legs, let's just say, but he's back, so it doesn't matter right now. But it did keep him out for a long time. In fact, he really only got going, I believe, during the open week, so after the Kansas game and before TCU. 2 extra weeks there. That's good for a lot of players. You saw how much that helped David Long. He's got a big leg. He's talented too. Won those national kicking competitions. Was a specialist All-America by the services that evaluate kickers and have the camps for them. So again, he's talented. He's on scholarship. He needs to produce. Right now, though, I know that we want to point and laugh at Billy Kinney and give him a banana or an orange wedge or whatever, but truth is, he's really punted well. His again, how you measure punters is very different. You don't just necessarily look at their average. you could have 40-yard punts that drop the ball at the 10-yard line, and you're doing your job. On screen, though, a guy with a 48-yard average probably is more impressive, but what you're doing when you kick it is probably as important as anything else, though. Can you get it inside the 10 or the 5? Can you give it good hang time where your coverage team can get down there and cover and make sure you don't give up a return? I think they're pretty satisfied with him. He actually is pretty strong when it comes to hang time, so maybe the cramps aren't consistently bothering him. It was really hot Saturday, too. I'm not making excuses for him. It was hot. You saw a lot of players cramp up. The odd part is that a guy who's on the field 7-8 times a game and has plenty of opportunities to hydrate and to get potassium, he probably shouldn't be cramping up, right? So what happens? How do they monitor that? How do they make sure it doesn't happen again? I don't know. I'm pretty sure that they want to make sure it didn't happen a second time, so it did. Maybe you go to plan B or what have you, but maybe you have John Young warmed up and ready to go. Maybe you have 2 punters. How about that? And put them on the field at once, and you don't know who you're snapping it to. Trickery. We've never seen that before, too. So the question, though, is the answer to your question, though, is I don't think he's going to lose his job unless he begins punting really poorly. That was a situation where he just had to break the glass, Dana Holgorsen, and grab a punter because his was cramping up. So he found one that he happened to have around. What would have been interesting was if Kenny couldn't go and John Young wasn't with the team, if he hadn't traveled, if he wasn't able to go, who do you go with then? I don't know. Probably Evan Staley. I've heard that he's been able to do that before. Luke Hogan, the Houston transfer, has been able to do things like that, but I don't know what the quick change would have been. Fortunately, you don't have to worry about that. But as long as Kenny remains effective, he's not missing the ball or shanking it, he'll be okay. His hang time is good. People aren't returning punts against West Virginia. Could he go 4-7 yards deeper on some of his punts that land at the 12 or the 8? Maybe. That's something to work on, but now we're being picky there. So he's doing well. Can he do better? Sure. But he's not doing so poorly he can lose his job right now. Question in front of me right now, Brandon Muncie asks, to what degree has great punter play contributed to WVU's 2 losses? It's weird that we're talking about punters here, huh? Although it's sort of incontrovertible, I think that it's been a factor in both games. More importantly, field position has been a factor in both games. TCU's defense is very good. They will give up big pass plays, which we discussed, and they did, because that's the nature of how they play. They do a lot of one-on-one stuff, and when you're shifting and you're trading off the guy you're covering to someone else as he enters another zone, and you don't want to have 2 defenders in one zone, sometimes you're going to miscommunicate things, and sometimes you're just going to get tricked, and you're going to have a play like David Sills, where there were 2 receivers in one spot, defensive players got confused, and Sills got behind him and caught a touchdown pass. That works. Other times when you blitz and you're aggressive and you're using cornerbacks to fire off the edge and blindside or otherwise confuse your quarterback, you're not always going to be so fortunate to have someone like Will Grier who can see that coming and then throw the ball to a spot where he knows his receiver is going to be. What's probably the best part about that was to Karan White, meaning those 2 are on the same page more now than they were before. If you remember the first game, some important moments, Will Grier was looking mostly to Sills and Jennings. Big moments Saturday, 3rd downs and 4th downs, and when blitzes are coming out of space, went to Karan White. Now, granted, you're always going to throw into where the blitz is coming from, but still, they had to know where that ball was going to be. They had to know that Karan White was going to take a certain route, and the ball was going to be where it was. It's my dog, I'm sorry. So that's a good sign for the offense, too, as it continues to develop. The field position was a bummer, though. I mean, you can't really start inside your own 5 times and a half and expect to be good because that defense is stingy. They're going to make it hard for you to run. They're going to confuse your quarterback. They're going to send occasional blitzes from weird spots. It's hard. They really cover you tight. You'll catch a 6-yard route, and it's a 6-yard gain. If it's 3rd and 8, that doesn't do you any good. They make it hard. If you have to do that a bunch, that's an issue. You're going to get big plays. Are you going to get a 90-yard touchdown every time you're backed up inside your 5? Probably not. Are you going to get a big play every drive? Probably not. Can you drive 12 and 14 plays against a stingy defense 5 times and a half? Probably not. So for at least one game, certainly the punter was as big an explanation for the field position, and the field position was certainly a contributing factor to the loss for West Virginia. Eric Polero, or Poyero, how about Polero? Inconsistency is killing us like normal. WU could run the table and go 10-2 or lose more close games and finish 6-6. Just don't know which team will show up. I have a little test that I do every year right about this time of the year where you kind of know what you have. And for lack of a better phrase, you are who you are. You don't have enough time left in the season or practices between games to change your identity. And you just work at your weaknesses and you work on your strengths because you can't change reality. I don't think that's West Virginia right now. I think their defense is going to get a lot better than what it was the first 4 games, just because it's finally healthy. I have concerns about the depth in particular on the offense. That's why I'm so curious to see what happens with how they develop receiver depth, how they get creative to preserve their receivers. What can they do? I talked to someone this week who had some pretty good opinions about their situation on offense and is worried about flat tires at the end of the season and what happens if all the receivers aren't explosive at once. And if you're running them 6-7 miles a game sometimes, that's going to be hard to do. 10,000 yards per receiver in a game is not good in the 5th game of the season. That's a big deal. If you're doing that in the 7th and 8th and 9th game, that's going to really ridicule the consistency. Excuse me, really really derail the consistency of your offense. And that's West Virginia's calling card right now, is being able to pass and run and score points. But again, the good thing is if you're going to change your philosophy a little bit on offense because you have to preserve, probably feel better you have a defense you can trust right now. So I think they can be more consistent. Sure, I don't think this is a 5-win team. I don't think it's a 10-win team, but I think there's a great capacity to grow for the rest of the season here. Josh White says the balance of offensive plays seems to be more favored toward the pass than the run this year compared to the previous 2 years when the run percentage was greater than the pass percentage. Is that primarily due to the passing skill of the current QB or other seasons? I think it would be probably more of a concern if you had a different quarterback. You just have a really talented quarterback. Throws the ball better than anybody in a long, long time. Why wouldn't you use that? You don't have a great wealth of receivers, and I'm not sure anybody in there is terribly explosive. Marcus Sims is, but nothing against David Sills or Gary Jennings or Karan White, but those aren't guys who just run past you or who just jump over you and make a ton of big plays. So you have to rely on your quarterback to do the passing game stuff, and perception says that he's made open throws and the routes have worked and his receivers have done very good things, but truth is, if you ask the receivers, he's made some reads and some decisions before even last game where he put that offense in great situations and then he executed with his arm. So I don't know why you wouldn't want to use that. And again, if we're talking about how worn down maybe the receivers are right now, well, the running back should be spry, right? I think some concern is running the ball behind an offensive line that isn't proven or very deep. If you can cultivate that depth and keep your running backs fresh toward the end of the season, when it gets a little bit colder, when the spirals don't spin as tightly, and you don't enjoy the same passing success in windy, cold, rainy weather in the fall months as you do in the, well, I guess it's still fall. It feels like summer, but I don't know. There might be a method of the madness here, I guess, but I wouldn't be surprised if it shifts more toward 50-50. But right now, you got a great quarterback. It's not broken. West Virginia's offense is not the problem here. It just hasn't finished drives against 2 very good defenses it's played. Woodrow Reed Matheny asks, I know we wonder about wide receiver depth, but at what point do we allow a Ricky Rogers or some other guy that are unproven in a game? I don't know. Reggie Roberson has played. I'm surprised he hasn't played more. Ricky Rogers has played. Probably not surprised he hasn't played more just because he hasn't played a whole bunch in his career. They might just know who they have with him and what they have with him, and he's good for spot plays. Drew Bowen just hasn't played very much. All those guys that we projected to maybe make a splash in small roles. Again, not major contributions, but being able to play a couple series a half, being able to catch passes to convert first downs on first down. Again, you're not going to see these guys play on third downs or for full drives. You're going to see the best players in for the biggest downs, but if they can be productive on first and second downs, they can stay on the field longer, which is great. You're going to have Greer throwing to Sills and Jennings and White on third down, but where Roberson and Bowen and Rodgers have to make their hay is on first down and second down when they get into games early on drives. And some of that is just going to be continuity. Again, if we're talking about how Karan White is just now getting caught up and is on the same page as Will Greer, well, imagine where Roberson and Rodgers and Bowen and guys like that are. They're going to need more time. What we'll find out, though, is that West Virginia is not going to practice his top 3 receivers a ton this week, and they give them some time off. That's going to be good for those second-string guys to get in there and to get that continuity with the quarterback. If not now, then maybe never. So it's certainly the time where those 3 guys, maybe even somebody else like a Dominique Maiden, Alejandro Marenko, there's an opportunity. Go out there and get it. Just because you're not one of the top 4 guys doesn't mean you can't become a top 6 guy, and they're going to need 6 at least right now. Ron Pickrell, I don't understand why we can't catch and return punts. We have never returned a punt more than 5 yards. Hogue said it would improve under him, but it hasn't. I have no idea what to tell you. I get in trouble. People get mad at me when I talk about special teams. This happened many years ago. I'm going to steer clear of it now because my point's been made. Nothing can just happen on special teams. You can't just kick the ball off and get a tackle. You can't line up for a field goal and make it. You can't drop back to return a punt that bouncing near a guy or a safety pushing his player into your receiver. What I mean is you don't just watch the thing start and finish without an instance. It's got to be aggravating for the coaches and the players. I don't know what to tell you about punt return. They faced a heck of a punter Saturday. That's tough. They got 4 yards on one punt return. That is 4 more yards than the combined opposition has had contributed the entire season. So they had allowed one punt return for 0 yards in the first 4 games. Marcus Sims had a 4-yard return, and that was like history against TCU's punt team this year. They're just very good at it. Virginia Tech had a good punter, too. I don't know much about the punters at ECU or Delaware State or even Kansas. I know Cole Moose is a good punter. I think that's the punter's name at Kansas. They run into good punters, I guess, and they just don't have the scheme or the people to do it. What's curious to me, though, is they seem like they want to block a punt. I don't know what that means because they've given up trying to return them, if they saw something on tape, but kind of getting away with one on that punt debacle. Saturday was David Sills. He was up at the line feigning that he was going to block a punt, and then he drops back to be, the short return man, maybe a blocker for Sims, and he whiffed. He just missed his guy on the block. The guy got by him, but that's a tough spot to put him in. When you're trying to block the punt, you're spilling all those guys to get down the field. And if you're David Sills and you're protecting the punt returner and you got a whole bunch of people running at you, who do you pick? It's hard. And if you're backpedaling and you got to get a guy who's running at you, that's a tricky skill. And you're putting a guy in there who, by the way, plays a ton of offense. It's not an easy thing. I don't have an answer for you except that you're right. It's been a problem for a long time. They've said for a long time it's supposed to get better, and it hasn't. And it costs them more than it helps them, and that's the biggest issue, is that they've been paying that bill for a while and they've never gotten much out of it. Mark Schultz says, our offense seems to have some drastic ups and downs over the years. Our defense does as well to a lesser extent. Our special team seems to be perpetual garbage. What will it take to develop better special teams play? Is HCDH capable of coming up with a game plan to improve it? I don't have an answer for this, man. I think about this myself, too. And again, this is not just a 7-season thing with Holgorsen. This happened during the Bill Stewart years. This happened before him. Actually, when Bill Stewart was the coordinator for Rich Rodriguez. I think if you look around the country, you'll see a lot of special teams errors. It just seems like there's a wealth of them in West Virginia games, missing field goals, giving up big returns, kicking the ball out of bounds. I don't know. I mean, what is the plan for don't kick the ball out of bounds? I mean, that's a player thing. That's not a kickoff guy, a kickoff coach thing. You don't tell the guy to kick out of bounds. It happens. I think what was strange was they were spooked by Turpin, the returner from TCU, and they had not yet seen Evan Staley kick into that win, but they didn't want to let him. Evan Staley was doing fine. He had a touchback earlier in the game, but after time to score, they went to Mike Molina to kick because they thought he could execute a squib kick. His first kick of the day didn't work. It went out of bounds, and your best kickoff guy is standing on the sideline. To me, that's unusual. That is sometimes overthinking things. Sometimes you just got to go with, the devil you know, I guess. And if you're not going to tackle Turpin, you're not going to win the game. Oh, well, that's how it happens, I guess. Their idea, though, was let's avoid Turpin. Let's not let that guy beat us. I have a hard time arguing with that because if you remember several years ago, Kansas State, the only thing you don't want to let them do is have their kick return guy beat you. And that's who beat them. So that was a road game, too, that West Virginia could have won against a ranked team. Similar situation here. Sometimes you got to learn from your past mistakes. And maybe the one Saturday is one that they learned from this time here. Mark Wendell, do you think the refs are out to get us? Seems like since we joined the Big 12, we always get the calls going against us. The TCU game was awful. I'm not going to disagree with you on that one. I'm not a conspiracy theorist because it's been happening for years. I will say two things, though. People I talked to at West Virginia were very worried about the officiating before the Virginia Tech game because of who the official was. And when West Virginia was in the Big 12, the Big East going to the Big 12, they thought they got shafted sometimes by the officiating. And here's a guy who was involved in the Big East officiating against at the Virginia Tech Big East opponent of the past game against West Virginia. Only thing is that wouldn't they have been mad at Virginia Tech for leaving the Big East first? And I don't think that they were conspiratorial against Virginia Tech that day. So maybe it's just kind of woven into the fabric of people who watch West Virginia and follow these things. Saturday was terrible, though. I will admit that. I don't know how you overturn the battle interception. I'll be honest with you. If you showed me that play, if I'm walking down the street past a Best Buy and you pull me in and you say, Mike, look at this, and there's 15 TVs in the wall and it's just that play, and you say, all right, is this an interception or not? I would say no. I thought it was bobbling it, didn't have control. If you had told me, okay, but they called that an interception on the field, I would say, well, the call will stand. I don't know how you overturn that. There has to be just conclusive proof that that wasn't an interception. That didn't exist to me. I think that the offensive pass interference call was the wrong one against David Sills, like I'm sure a million other people do. I would have been better off seeing that called as offsetting penalties, because if you're going to say that the defender did something wrong, and certainly he did, I think you have to look at where Sills' arms were too. If they're going to call one, they probably should call the other there. I would have been much happier to see the game decided by the quarterback or the cornerback or the receiver or anybody else in shoulder pads and a helmet that day, or calling plays inside a headset, than guys with whistles and beanbags. Seems like that happens far too often. And again, if you're asking me what I would do about this, I wouldn't worry about the conspiracy. I would worry about how West Virginia reacts to these things in the future, because it can be compounding. You get worried about stuff like that. Your 11 guys can do everything they can to win the game, and then there's 8 guys in black and white who can do something to make it messy. And you've seen basketball teams and football teams even get caught up in officiating. It happened at a bowl game in the Pinstripe Bowl several years ago. Make sure it doesn't happen this year. So steer clear of it. Don't make it a bigger deal than it is. I think the one thing that Holgerson's done very well so far is stay clear of getting involved in it. I would have been happier as a media person seeing him rip the officials on Saturday night. What does that do for him? It cost him a couple $1,000 and maybe gains him a few fans, but it's not going to help him in the future. And more importantly, it's not going to send the right message to his players, who may have to deal with this more often if they are, in fact, the victims of a conspiracy. Dylan Geared says, what do you think of Quantel Rains? I've asked about him to some people who do much more recruiting than I do, because he looks really good on tape. I think he's a good player, and he's kind of fit for what they do, don't you think? And where he's from matters. Who's visiting coming up matters. I don't want to give that all away, but go read some of the stories that our guy Chris Anderson has produced today, and it seems like things are lining up in a certain manner that might get you excited. But I think he fits, and I think that part of his profile fits about where he's from and who he knows, and the relationships he has with people who are and who were on the team. It just seems like it makes sense to me. My crystal ball is very foggy when it comes to this stuff, though. But I think he fits, and if he believes he fits, and what he believes in fits, and who he believes in fits, and sure, why not? 2 more here. Ron Pickrell again says, our punt return team has been horrible since Holgs came. Yeah, I mean, yes, I guess. Final question here. Jared Casto. Do you see Greer leaving for the NFL after this year? I will tell you what. Davis Webb is an interesting case study, because he was with Jake Spavital last year, and a really good quarterback who, had he gone out a year earlier, maybe could have been drafted higher than he was. Played the season, did fine, but this past draft class was populated by very good quarterbacks. It's hard to project who people are going to like in the quarterback class, because sometimes you find people who fall and rise in manners different than what you expect. So you have an idea who your top quarterbacks are going to be. I don't think Greer is in there necessarily. Even with the big season, I don't think he's going to jump up into that top tier or a first round thing. But after you look at the first handful of guys, 4 or 5, where could he be next year if he does this twice? That is something to think about. I don't think that Will Grier is destitute. I don't think he's in a rush to leave the college experience. There's 2 things that are interesting. He went through a lot to get his chance to play and maximize his career. Is 1 season and really 1.5 season going to be enough for him? I don't know. And then conversely, he has been through a lot, and he's got a wife and a kid. And if the money is there and the opportunity is there, if he gets a good report, where'd he go? You're never going to get an answer on that from him in the middle of the season, but I think at the end of the season, that is something he'll really think about. But I don't think it's a rush where he wants to go or needs to go because it's now or never. If he has a really good year, where could he be in March? And where could he be in March of 2019? David Adams punctuates the day saying guaranteed he will. will. I get you. Makes sense. Looking in the room, that is all the questions I have. Half an hour, guys. Way too much. Way too much. Good questions, okay answers. I won't ramble as much in the future, but that's all the time I have. I will see you next time. For 24/7 Sports, I'm Mike Sazza.